to record. So I will try to do my recording. I will record in at least one class. I have 3 sections, but I don't teach anything different or unique in any of the classes. So these will always be the same, okay? All right. So when we started on Wednesday, we talked about how valuable channels were. 1/3 of the worldwide gross domestic product is engaged in channel functions in one way or another, and that also includes sales. As I said Wednesday, the channels act as a major gatekeeper. They're the boundary spanners, the hand that connects the manufacturer to the consumer together. And because they're usually the first experience that a consumer has, that channel experience strongly affects their perception of the manufacturer's brand image. We talked about how well Lexus does in separating itself by doing something as simple as just taking care of oil changes and tune-ups in the first year, not tune-ups, but doing normal maintenance work in the first year. That is great. And because of 2 things, because it is an underutilized source of sustainable competitive advantage, the fact that it is the most expensive and the most difficult is a major reason why it's a sustainable competitive advantage, because quite simply, it just costs too much and takes too long to duplicate. The channel environment system in Walmart is not duplicated quite simply because the money that it takes to duplicate it is nearly impossible. It's interesting that Walmart has kind of flipped backwards in the way that they do things. Walmart is trying to be like Amazon. Amazon was trying to be like Walmart, but the problem with that quite simply is retail interaction takes time and effort to really understand it. And retail is a very labor-intensive kind of discipline. And Amazon quite hasn't got it figured out, all right? So what is marketing channel strategy? If we look at standard marketing structure, marketing channels is one thing, but strategy is something different. So let's first talk about what a marketing channel is. So marketing channel is one of the 4 P's: the price, promotion, product, and place, okay? Marketing channels are the set of interdependent organizations that are involved in the process of making a product or service available for consumption. The channel is the organizations. It is important to note that they are independent and interdependent. Channels is a very difficult process because it requires the willing cooperation between organizations who have unique purposes for being in business. All right. So think of that. The manufacturer has their own reasons for being in existence. The wholesalers have their own reasons for being in existence. And of course, the end users, they have their own reasons why they buy. There's not just one firm, there are many entities involved, each of these with individuals with their own desires and their own reasons for existence. And it's just amazing we're not all fighting each other. It is. But what you find in channels, which is so important, is the willingness to mutually cooperate for everyone's benefit. And this is another thing that's important to understand, is that the benefits usually are more to do with system-wide benefits than with individual benefits. The best marketing systems are when the system grows, because when the system grows, each individual entity has success. Each channel member depends on each other. And then the last statement is an important one. We talked about event programming. Marketing channels is not an event. Marketing channels is a process. All right. So if you think of event planning, all right, event planning means you're working towards this individual goal in which you ultimately achieve this kind of success. And then you have an afterwards, and when you talk about basically what happened. Well, marketing channels is a constant interaction process that is always evolving, always changing. Jack Sheff, who was like one of the great marketing gurus of all time, says that marketing is context driven. The individuals that are sitting in this class are substantially different from the individuals that were sitting in this class 10 years ago, and then 10 years before that. And as people change, and as the process changes and the context changes, marketing changes as well. Vitally important. So we started before the pandemic with people ordering their pizza and being delivered in 30 minutes or less. We see the advent of individuals like myself who buy online and go pick it up, because those are the ways events have processed. It means also for like the pizza people, they realize when they get a pickup order, they get that out as quickly as they can because it requires the least amount of labor possible. And so these are the ways in which things evolve. A process, not an event. So, as I talked about, many times the process frequently takes time to accomplish it. And usually when the sale is over, it doesn't mean that everything ends. So Hyde, H-E-I-D-E, in 1980, expressed what was called the discrete transaction, which is an interaction which happens once and never again. And he looked at it as if you went to the gas station, bought gas with cash, and never went back. In the truth, marketing never is like that. Marketing tends to be longer term and a relationship. And it's this relationship and our interaction many times that defines the success. So I'm dying waiting for my computer to come in right now, and the next best delivery date, or let's just say shipping date, is January 30th. And I'm chewing glass right now, waiting for it to happen. And so this is kind of the process that happens. All right. You can have such a thing as too much success. So what is the purpose of marketing channels in the process? It's to satisfy the end users. There's no other reason to be in existence. The end users can be consumers, or they can be business buyers or wholesalers. How do we define consumers, or how do we define retail? You don't have to know this for the test, not until we get to the chapter on retail. But the reason, or how we define retail, comes down to the buyer's motive. And so if I were to go get a ream of paper over at Staples for my daughters to do their drawing on, that's for my personal consumption. If I were to go in myself to Staples and buy a ream of paper because I wanted to use it here to print the test, then it has an entirely different reason, because it's all down to the reasons for buying this item. And so this is, like everything, marketing channels is a process. And so now we talk about strategy. Strategy is one of those things, once again, that is a process in which we are motivated to perform in a certain way to achieve our goals. Entrepreneurs our good business people recognize that we have unlimited opportunities, but limited resources. Strategy hopes to take our limited resources and use them in the best way we possibly can. Investing in channels is very difficult. It is very expensive. But perhaps of all of the 4 P's, if it's done right, it lasts better. Because it is so expensive, it minimizes your competitors because your competitors can't simply spend to keep up. Many of them can't. And when you're good at it, and you have the economies of scale, it reduces your distribution costs rather than increases them. It is because of this expense, its ability to minimize the rivalry you have with competitors, that it results in a superior financial performance. There is compelling statistical evidence that states that the money we spend on good channel systems ultimately results in money coming back. And so, what is a strategy? Strategy is the set of activities, the processes that go on between the manufacturers and the whole channel system. What we do to try to design and manage an efficient channel system. In 1990s, doctors traditionally did their own billing. They did everything in house. They worked from hard files and those kind of things. In the 90s, there was a wave of accounts receivable being taken over from physicians by management systems. Why? Because they can do it better than doctors can. Doctors aren't in the business of doing accounts receivable. They're in the business of taking care of their clients, all right? And it's these activities and their designing and the managing of this channel strategy that created this sustainable competitive advantage. So how does it work? Basically, they send all their accounts receivable to a third party. The third party takes care of everything. Third party does the printouts, third party does the receipts, third party chases down the 90 days. One of the more difficult things that doctors have, quite simply, is bills over 60. Once a bill is over 60 days, it's about 15% recoverable. They get a flat fee for that from the accounts receivable people now, and then it means that they don't have to deal with it. And that 5% that they send in every month is a bargain when it comes to the amount of work and effort that they'd have to have in their office to do this again. This is an example of a channel strategy. Okay, so who participates in the marketing channel? This is where my test questions start to come in, okay? Well, I'm sorry, but it was before. So one of the things you're going to notice in these slides, I want you to notice is that you'll get a title slide and then it'll be details. So in this title slide, we're talking about the 3 key entities, and then after I get past this slide, we'll talk about them one at a time. And so who are the 3 entities, only 3, in marketing channels? In supply chain, it can be infinitely. The first is the manufacturers. The manufacturers are usually the originators. And I think that's the best way of putting it, because they don't necessarily have to make their own products. The next is the intermediaries, the middle people, and then finally the end users. And once again, we'll talk about end users, and I will say it over and over again because I really want you to know this question. It really hurts. End users perform channel functions. So that's kind of a brief. So let's talk about these one at a time. So as I said before, the manufacturer is the originator or the producer of the product or service that's being sold. The manufacturer may be what's known as the channel captain. The channel captain is the prime mover and initiator of the channel process. These usually are the individuals that collect the intermediaries together. They're the individuals who negotiate the contracts. They usually take title and physical possession of the goods. And I want to say this, and please get this right as a question. The channel captain does not have to be the manufacturer. The channel captain, whoever that might be, is just the prime mover. So in a process during the 80s into 90s, in 1996, a marketing guy by the name of Parasamon said that the manufacturer is no longer the channel captain or the prime mover. Channel captains or the power in the channel environment has shifted to retail. So this is 1996. Does anybody want to guess which retailer fundamentally changed the power structure in channels? Anybody want to guess?
Walmart.
Walmart, thank you. Yes. Walmart from 1980 to 1996 was building one new supercenter every 6 weeks for a period of almost 15 years. And so now they have 6,400 stores in the United States. Dollar General has been building 1,000 stores a year since 2008. They now have 18,000 stores and they're looking for 28,000. If that sounds crazy, but it's true. But what all of this has done is that it's fundamentally shifted the prime mover in the channel environment from retail to the retail outlet versus the manufacturer. Manufacturers are having a lot more pressures nowadays, especially for the so many multiple manufacturers of different unique products. Channel captains don't have to be the manufacturers. So what do the manufacturers produce or what do they originate? Well, they have two things. One of them is branded manufacturing. And so branded manufacturing are brands that are known to the end users. Coke, Apple, Hewlett-Packard. Those are what are considered brand manufacturing. Private label manufacturers provide goods to branded manufacturers and they put their names on them. And the interesting thing is that even though they don't invest themselves in building a brand name, sometimes they do. So has anybody heard the name ASUS? ASUS. Anybody heard of them? Okay, when I was growing up, ASUS was a manufacturer of motherboards. They made bulletproof motherboards. They just wouldn't break. They ran every time. You could overclock them by 180% and they wouldn't burn out quick. But they were just awesome. They also made graphics cards. They made many other things. ASUS as a manufacturer became known as a quality outlet, quality good. And so ultimately now they became so valuable that they have become a branded merchandise. You could buy ASUS laptops if you wanted to. So that's kind of an interesting way in which this has evolved. Now, does it have to be a physical piece of equipment? No. You do not have to be the manufacturer of a physical object in order to create a channel environment. And my example would be H&R Block. H&R Block is a franchising of Tax. so that there's this channel environment that they created with H&R Block, and it's been around for a while, and they've done pretty well. All right. So manufacturers at the top. The next is intermediaries. Intermediaries refers to any channel member, not the manufacturer or not the end user. You know, intermediaries by themselves is a pretty broad category. But they're valuable. Every one of those are valuable. Intermediaries, as categories go, generally boil down to three. You have the wholesalers, you have retailers, and you'll have specialized intermediaries, and we'll talk about these one at a time. So wholesalers are sellers to other intermediaries, such as retailers. They include agents, brokers, manufacturers, representatives. They also include retailers. The key thing behind a wholesaler, a very important thing, is they take title and possession of inventory. That is a key point about retailers. By taking title and possession, it also means they can control prices. Because once the manufacturer sells the good, in essence, the wholesaler, other than some kind of contract, the prices may be suggested, but they ultimately may not be sold at that, all right? But wholesalers do so much more. When we talk about wholesalers, you get an idea. The real key behind a wholesaler is the service that they bring. They are valuable to manufacturers because they become collectors of products in like categories. They are valuable to retailers because they facilitate the search process. So what does that mean? When I was working with a computer store in Lafayette in Louisiana, we had one wholesaler that we worked with in Houston. And we did certain specialized things. We did E-size plotters with Hewlett-Packard large plotters for engineering. And we used the special computer desk system called Victor. And we used a software program that was just brand new. It was called AutoCAD. And AutoCAD is like the #1 computer-aided design package there was. Now, the difficulty with, of course, with that is that we didn't have necessarily the time to invest in setting it up in an ideal way. But our wholesaler in Houston did. They were specialized. They understood what it took to make things go right. And so what they became is this special connection of information. Where they made their money is they could buy AutoCAD in lots of 80, and they would have substantial discounts, whereas we would have to buy AutoCAD and only be able to mark it up 10%. That was the advantage that they became. They facilitated the search process for us, and they made it a lot easier for us to be able to get those things. Where wholesalers, their primary functions is in negotiation of the prices, the collectors of our needs, and then the promotion of those goods as well. Retailer intermediaries, we don't have to explain about this. Retailers are those organizations that sell to the final consumer. They can be owned by the manufacturer or they can be themselves. The buying motive of the consumer that they wish to use these things for their personal consumption is ultimately what makes the difference. Retailers can have significant sales to businesses, but their storefronts are usually the thing that identify them as retailers. Retailers can do wholesale sales, but their purpose in business is to be retail. Wholesalers, retailers, and finally, what are known as specialized intermediaries. Specialized intermediaries work around one single function in the channel process, and they do that one thing very well. They can process credit cards. They can provide insurance. They can be what are called 3PGL, third-party logistics providers. All they do is ship. All they do is warehouse. Pods is a great example. So just to give you an idea of a specialized intermediary and how important they are, modern Subaru and Toyota, their franchises, their company name franchises, but they have their own unique names. That's why they're called modern. They're given a unique franchise name. They may have a contract to buy 200 cars in a month. So think about it. If just the wholesale price was $30,000, that's $6 million. Where would modern Toyota be able to get the money? So what they would do is the order for 200 comes up, they call up GE Capital or they call Westinghouse, and they say, we need $6 million to be able to get these 200 cars. And they say, fine, we'll cut a check. GE Capital or Westinghouse goes out, cuts a check for $6 million, sends it to Toyota corporate. Those 200 cars get in. In a month, what happens is modern Subaru, let's say they sell 100 of them. At the end of the month, modern Subaru or Toyota cuts a check to cover the cost of those 100 automobiles that they sold, and they cut a check for the interest on the other 100. And so that's how it works. Specialized intermediaries are a sign of an efficient channel structure. Specialized intermediaries mean that your channel system is functioning to such a level that it requires unique individuals who have highly specialized knowledge to be able to perform those functions and do it well. And so if you want to know how efficient or how good a channel system is, look and see where the specialized intermediaries. So, excuse me, almost forgot. This is the other end. The last member is the end users. And yes, this is a test question. End users are channel members because they perform channel functions, just as I've talked about. I go buy something from Costco, I buy it in large lots, and I break them down into smaller ones. I'm performing the function of sorting. And because I perform those functions, I generally am given something of a break. And so these are the members. The manufacturers, the specialized intermediaries who are unique unto themselves. And the key behind the channel intermediaries is they sell to other intermediaries. Remember that. And then the retailers, of course, who sell to the consumers. And the consumer is, in essence, part of the channel system because they perform channel functions. So I think I will talk about why marketing channels exist, and I think that'll be good. So why do they exist? I mean, logically, if you think about it, shouldn't consumers go directly to the consumer? Excuse me, shouldn't manufacturers go directly to their consumers? The direct model, you always got a direct connection with your consumer. Why do you have people in the way? Well, there's the reasons why, and the biggest one, of course, is that they provide value. So what is the value for the downstream? Well, here are the four things. So let me look at this. Let's talk about a grocery store, and let's talk about condiments. Let's talk about mayonnaise, mustard, ketchup, relish, all of those things. So let's look at an average supermarket. Average supermarket has 52,000 separate items, or even up to 150,000. It is amazing. The average supermarket makes its money off of a 2% margin, which means if it sells $100,000 in a day, the profit is 2. How does it do it? Well, it does it because it does things in a very efficient manner. So anyway, let's look at it this way, central office. The first thing that we do is, let's say it gets a shipment from Van Camp and everything comes in. So the first thing that they do is they start to sort out. So I've got this homogeneous group of condiments, but what I do is I move the mayonnaise over here, I put the mustard over here, I put the ketchup over there, the relish over there, and so I've started to sort those out. That's the first thing that I do. And this is the advantage it has for me as a consumer. The next is that I've got this shipment from Van Camp, now I get a shipment from Heinz, and then I get a shipment from Hunt's, and then I get a shipment of Sam's Choice. And now what I'm doing is I'm getting similar stocks together from other ones, and now I'm starting to create these unique categories, all right? The next thing I do is that I take the mustards that are all one type, and then I start breaking them down into smaller and smaller lot sizes, because the smaller lot sizes are more valuable to consumers, and we actually are willing to spend more. And then finally, what I do is I have an assortment of all of those products resale in association with each other. So I have this long line in a supermarket of condiments, but every one of them is broken down, and we all know where they are. We all know them in every store that they're at, and we know how the categories stack together. Yeah, maybe I'm too boring, but I think supermarkets in their way are just quite amazing. And they do this not only in just an every day-to-day kind of thing. And I'm very impressed with that. So just to give you an idea of another boring thing I did. So one of the things about Walmart is that they have an accumulation, but their assortment is not as wide. So I actually did this. I went into Walmart and I saw how many different mustards they have in terms of sizes and different varieties. They had about 27. Then I went to Harris Teeter and they had 74. And so what you find is that where supermarkets advantages versus a Walmart has one of everything, but they don't have a lot of assortment in the things that they have. But they do their job quite well. And this is one of those things that makes it unique for us. As consumers, we can go into every supermarket and we can guess, even if we've never been, within about 30 seconds of where each thing is and where everything is down the aisle. And so this is the benefit that we have for the downstream members. For the upstream members, what we have is the ability to make all of our transactions routine. If we realize that every transaction requires some form of negotiation, one way or another, pricing structure or whatever, it can be very difficult if I'm going to try to negotiate every contract with every individual who wants a can of peas. It can be an enormous job to try to do all of those things, and quite simply beyond efficiencies, all right? By the very same process, if I am a retail outlet, if I have multiple manufacturers where I get goods from, that can be difficult to do as well. One of the things Walmart did is they cut down their transactions to a minimum by making sure that every transaction is routine. In 1994, they started what was called the Continuous Replenishment Program, CRP. They come up with better initials. But the Continuous Replenishment Program meant is that Walmart would yearly order 10,000 of an item, but they perhaps may only want 1,000 in at a time. They asked their vendors to store their goods until they're needed. Now, what did Walmart give the vendors? The Walmart gave the vendors access to all of the goods stocked on a Walmart shelf in every place in the world. And that was what they gave the vendors. But this reduction in the number of transactions also reduces the number of contacts, and it reduces the complexity of the exchange system and thus facilitates the transactions. So to boil this down, to show you visually how this works, let me give you an example. This is a decentralized system of exchange. So I want you to think of all of these as mom and pop grocery stores, convenience stores, if you will. They may have 4 to 5 employees overall. They tend to be rural in where they're at. And let's just say these are the sin goods. So one of these is tobacco, one of these is alcohol, one of these is candy, and one of them is soft drinks. And think of each one of those as a manufacturer. Now, the manufacturer sells in sizes of pallets. And so a pallet is actually something to affect a 4 foot on a square standing about 5 feet high. That's how they sell their goods. That's the way they do it. It is impossible for these individual mom and pop retailers to be able to order from these manufacturers. They simply haven't got the requirements to do that. Not only that, but for the manufacturers, they would have to maintain contracts with each one of these individual mom and pop stores. It's a very inefficient system. It doesn't work. Now, watch what happens when we do this. Let's put a wholesaler in there. Let's say this wholesaler specializes on the so-called sin goods, all right? It specializes on the alcohol, specializes on cigarettes, on candy and soft drinks. And not only that, but they specialize in mom and pop stores. This is what a specialized intermediary, even though it's a wholesaler, can do, all right? They understand each one of these mom and pop stores. This individual mom and pop store has value to this wholesaler because this wholesaler needs to maintain these relationships in order to be successful. They get to understand what they do. They get to understand when's the best time of the year and what times are the worst. They understand their needs locally, whereas others don't. And not only that, but they can take all 10 of these stores, accumulate what their needs are, and be able to bargain at a much better rate with these manufacturers. They perform that as a value function. The manufacturers, in turn, don't have to deal with 10 individual mom and pop stores. They deal with one wholesaler. And so what it ultimately means is instead of the contracts being done with 10 different retailers, it's just one. So we go from 40 contact lines to 14. And this is the advantages of what an intermediary does. that one wholesaler can focus mind and body on providing the best advantages to the retailers, provide a unified point, economies of scale kick in, and the wholesaler makes money on the negotiation and the distribution, and the retailers get the exact goods they need in the exact quantities that are best for them. And so these are the reasons why a centralized system is more efficient when it comes to a channel environment. Okay, we are done for today. On Wednesday, we will finish chapter 1. We might dip in a little bit into chapter 2. We'll see. Y'all go have a great day. Thank you.